My name is Francisco Aragon, and I direct Letras Latinas, the literary initiative at Notre Dame's Institute for Latino Studies, also known as ILS. Before I turn things over to Mark Sanders, who will say a few words about our co-presenting sponsor, I want to take a moment and thank our other sponsors, and also say that 3 Notre Dame graduate students will do the honors of introducing our featured poets after we hear from Mark. They are Emiliano Gomez and Callie Peed, who are MFA candidates in our creative writing program, and Kevin Bustamante, who is a PhD candidate in political science. Other university sponsors include the Institute for Scholarship and the Liberal Arts, specifically their Henkel's Lecture Fund, the Department of Africana Studies, the Creative Writing Program, the Department of English, the Literature of Annihilation, Exile, and Resistance Initiative, the Department of Romance Languages and Literatures, the Jose E. Fernandez Hispanic Caribbean Studies Initiative, the Department of American Studies, and the Graduate School. That makes up our institutional sponsorship. We also counted on the generosity of private benefactors. And I want to offer a special public thanks to a benefactor who made the trip from Washington, D.C. to be with us these 2 days. Thank you, Jim Wilson. And now, please join me in welcoming to the podium Mark Sanders, the inaugural director of the Initiative on Race and Resilience.
Good evening. I hope you all are doing well. Just middling. Just had a wonderful dinner, great reception. Things are good. I'm Mark Sanders, as you just heard, the director of the Notre Dame Initiative on Race and Resilience. Global in scope and comparative and interdisciplinary and critical approach, IRR is a community of scholars, students, artists, and community members united in the ongoing effort to dismantle systemic racism and to support and celebrate communities of color. We pursue this mission through an emphasis on research, education, and community building, with programming and funding in each of these areas, about which I'll say more momentarily. Indeed, I invite you to visit the IRR website for more information, and please feel free to contact me directly if you'd like to be placed on our mailing list so that you get notices about all of our events. In brief, when you go to the website, you'll find information about resources and programming under each category. For example, we provide research grants and forums for the presentation of ongoing research, and we have plans for the compiling of data so that IRR and Notre Dame become a site for research on race and inequality. So too, by way of education, IRR provides course development and pedagogical development grants, and we have plans for a major and minor in comparative race and ethnic studies. And by way of community building, we are in the process of forming partnerships with community organizations such as the Civil Rights Heritage Center and Brain Lair Books, and IRR is partnering with the Center for Social Concerns to create a practitioner and residence program in which a community organizer working on an issue of systemic racism, say water in Flint, Michigan, for example, comes to Notre Dame to educate the IRR community about their project and take advantage of resources that Notre Dame might offer to advance their work. And ideally, the practitioner will take us off campus to the project site to aid in that project's advancement. Furthermore, in keeping with our mission to promote research, education, and community building addressing systemic inequality according to race, and to support communities of color, IRR is overjoyed to be a part of this auspicious occasion. Thank you, Professor Francisco Aragon, for organizing this conference and for inviting IRR to be a part of it. And by extension, thank you to Letras Latinas and to the Institute for Latino Studies for your ongoing work to place the histories, politics, and cultures of Latinx communities at the heart of the intellectual and cultural life of Notre Dame. And most importantly of all, thank you, poets and scholars, for making this such an edifying moment. I mentioned the three areas of emphasis for IRR, but I didn't explain the central role that the arts and literature in particular, play for us. In terms of each area, we see the arts as a form of research, a vital means of education, and an essential means of building community. For example, we are in the second year of our Artist in Residence program. Last year, we hosted, in partnership with NDIAS, that's the Notre Dame Institute for Advanced Study, we hosted Dwayne Betts. And this year, we are hosting the Pulitzer Prize winner, yes, indeed. We are hosting the Pulitzer Prize winner and twice Poet Laureate of the U.S., Natasha Trethewey, Natasha Trethewey. Indeed. Beyond understanding the role of arts in relation to our three foci, we celebrate literature and the arts as a means of understanding race more profoundly. We know that race is at once a tool of colonization, a means of domination and exploitation, and at the same time a site of identity, resistance, and resilience. We never want to reduce race to racism. We want the initiative to be fully alive to this critical tension, to race as both poison and antidote, as it were. And so we conceive of literature and the arts as the best way to remain attentive to this both and at the heart of the concept. The arts are infinitely creative in presenting us with the destructive capacity of race and the multiple ways in which communities of color identify and assert themselves as agents in the ongoing process of self-making. And what better way to celebrate communities of color than to explore a community that has been neglected nearly to the point of invisibility for generations. The Afro-Latinx community has been here since the very first moment of European contact with this so-called New World. As subjects of the Spanish and Portuguese empires, kidnapped Africans and their descendants created the wealth which made the Enlightenment possible, which made the dream of personal sovereignty, political independence, and popular government possible. And as Orlando Patterson and so many other scholars have documented, it was enslaved blacks and their struggles for freedom in Haiti, Brazil, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Colombia, and the United States, and indeed across this entire hemisphere, that carried the concepts of freedom, equality, and democracy forward and saved them from the ongoing onslaught of despotism and authoritarianism. We have seen thus far and will continue to see how Afro-Latinx poets claim for themselves and their communities a place at the table in what Du Bois called the kingdom of culture, and by extension a place in the regional and national communities that too often have insisted on their invisibility. The Initiative on Race is proud to bear witness to your poetry. Thank you for letting us be a part of this historic moment.
A jazz musician, pop aficionado, songwriter, playwright, screenwriter, author, of Stepmotherland, selected by John Murillo, who's with us, and published by Notre Dame Press. Recipient of the NEA in Poetry. Faculty at branches of CUNY and NYU, a darling of Pulitzer and National Book Award winners. Darrel Alejandro Holnes is here tonight. Yeah. As to how to describe his poetry, I will leave to the poetry of Darrel Alejandro Holnes to describe that very thing. It is a poetry of their streets, of poder, of breath and edges. It is a poetry of tonetics that would make Chris Rock, Gwendolyn Brooks, RuPaul, and Wanda Coleman proud. It has praise danced our world back to being one that little brown black boys like him can believe in. His poetry makes enough magic of our stories to save lives. His poetry sings a señorita who doesn't sweat the small stuff and is therefore unstoppable. His poetry is tonight diamante, extravaganza, eleganza, folks, with not the enthusiasm of a concerto, but a live metal concert. Let's give it up for Darrel Alejandro Holnes.
I always promised I'd never do drag. You liked me as straight as a man in love with another could ever be, and I did too. But you also loved women, how their backs widen where hips appear, how their necks swerve like swans swallowing water when they call your name. Their long hair stroking your face as they wake from nestling your chest the morning after. So here I am, wearing the wig I made in the image of the blondes you preferred, but said you could never love. Applying eyeliner, but not for it to run. I will never love him again, I fearlessly announced to the mirror, as I beat my face with powder base into submission, as if one could ever fall out of the hero's arms and not back into peril. Tonight, for the first time, I dance to save myself from distress, becoming the one woman you'll never have instead. Tonight, at the Esta Noche bar in the Mission District, I'm distance. The closest I ever came to doing drag before was when I was crowned prom king, but chose instead the queen's tiara. Cubic zirconia somehow closer to real than the king's cardboard cutout crown. Tonight, I am diamante, extravaganza eleganza. A girl singing Shine to the Yonsei record, declaring myself the queen bee of the night, singing, take all of me, I just wanna be the girl you like, the kind of girl you like. Sachet, chante, strut, shimmy, shining on stage, dunking it like an Oreo, making the masses shake their asses at the command of the scepter firmly in my hand. A king, I queen so hard, my earthquaking rule breaks the laws of nature. Flesh-colored Spanx and control-top leggings tuck it away where the sun don't shine. A black lace-up corset covers the missing rib, but lets the rest of me hang out enough to work and soak up applause from an audience who loves this boy dressed as girl, boy dressed as girly man, boy dressed as man enough to drag, man dragging on, man moving on, man gone. I wrote that poem after a breakup that happened after AWP. And I was like, it's just so interesting the beautiful things you can make out of anger, you know? And I think that poem helped save me in a lot of ways, you know? Not that he broke my heart that bad, but, you know, it was still an important moment for me. When I was a kid, I grew up in a Panama that was caught between the narco wars in Colombia and U.S. military presence that was rebuilding a city it had bombed. And to be honest, when I was a little kid, I really only remember spending time with my family. My grandparents would babysit us when my parents were at work, and they really created a sense of childhood for me that I recognize now was incredibly precious. So I have a favorite memory of dancing in the living room with my grandfather, and I was sharing the story with a friend a few years ago, and she encouraged me to write a poem about it, and this is what came out. Praise Song for My Mutilated World. Ode to the Japanese radio, oozing hot tunes in the hot afternoon of my childhood at age 4 in La Ciudad de Panama at my abuelo's house. Ode to the black women made of air and imagination who Pito and I dance with in his living room in La Rosita, the rosy part of Rio Abajo known for turning bullets into blooms. Ode to La Olwa Brás, the early 90s Brazilian siren in Kaoma, who seduces us into dancing with our dream girls and away from the bullet-bitten bodies plastered across the front page of La Crítica News. Ode to the famous mulatto melody howling from the bellows of the accordion on the record, and to the Portuguese words I pronounce in near Spanish as I try to sing along to the forbidden dance song. A recordação vai estar com ela onde for. A recordação vai estar para sempre onde for. There isn't much forbidden in my family except piedra and yerba and the tiroteo from their trade. There isn't much forbidden in my family except pistolas y secuestros and chanchudos y corruptos who have become piedra's slaves. Pito and I saved the negras in our arms from piedreros, drug dealers, and the cartel with our moreno swing hips, dips, and spins to the 2-beat carimbo drum rhythm stronger than the pulse thumping through my little boy body until I can't tell the difference between my corazón and the radio's tontón, until our dream girls become our real women, until we've danced our world back to being one that little brown black boys like me can believe in. Are there any Shakira fans in the audience? Okay, I see some. Can you pass me the Pellegrino? There's an era for everybody, for Shakira. So, this next poem I wrote after a first date. And it's for anyone who ever thought that they had love at first sight. Tú. In the music video, it looks like Shakira is dying. I want to die for you, although we've just met. Give you my bones to help you stand taller, and my feet for you to walk on when yours are worn. This is what she sings. Love worth dying for. 7 years ago, I loved her video, and now hear its song wailing in my head as I struggle to hear what you're saying. A good omen at Cafe Adobe, the setting of our first date. Make love to me on this table for two. I don't need my flesh if I have you. So devour my body as you need, breaking into the garden, past the wall that keeps our home countries, my Panama, your Rwanda, out on the other side. Your sins washed in my old blood and complexion, sing out. Listen to the unusual yodel in my throat, a ballad as I nail my limbs to this restaurant table. Eres tú, amor, mis ganas de reír, el adiós que no sabré decir, porque nunca podré vivir sin ti. But for this feast to nourish your body, we must first pray, or at least say we believe in something. I don't believe in this nation, but can in your naked grace. Come, make me a man of faith. Leave your body too, if you'd like. In my country, I dreamed of leaving my body all the time. The scar below my right eye is flesh broken by soldiers, trying to scare my mother into telling them my father's whereabouts. My sun-kissed undertone, torn open, reveals an ancestor's sinless shame, mejorando la raza. But I don't want to be whiter, just free, sweetly delivered into your dark matter and its boundlessness, reborn into love, risen in translation. Y'all, I don't know why when I was reading that poem, I wanted to cry. It's just Shakira just gets me going sometimes. You know, old school Shakira was like, yeah, she was really on something. So, okay. My father recently retired as a canal port captain in the Panama Canal. And I wrote this poem on the occasion of his retirement. It's called Ode to My Father, the Captain. Can everyone hear me okay? Ode to my father, the captain. Praise be to my father. Glory be to his never-blinking eyes, wide open in solidarity with the unstoppable water flow between oceans and the endlessly swift airstreams in the sky. Ever alert, armed only with his compass and memorized maps of the stars. He pilots the ship through locks in the Panama Canal to turn tides on a dime in the dance of trade and unlock the earth's many ancient water routes. Honor be to my father for keeping us worldly with rubber cargo from Indonesia for our sneaker soles, and tantalizing tantalite cargo from Brazil for our iPhones, in a world where people are defined by their crazy love of foreign things. Praise be to the captain's pepper tongue, speaking orders in an island-infused English to the ship's home squad, while also speaking a smooth-sailing Spanish to his canal crew of good-time guy, Panam master pilots, for navigating the planet's sea of tongues with style, and the graceful tenetics of an articulate diplomat, as any black man who is among the first captains of his kind would have to do. Praise to the giants on whose shoulders my father stands, to the shackled gallants packed top to bottom and shipped in galleons from Badagree or Cape Coast Castle to West Indian plantations, and then to our isthmus to build and labor our canal. To the ancestors who guide my father when his motors break with their celestial steering, with a gentle push from their hands of sky, just as he guides me to steer my black man body past us having once been considered cargo, past his now commanding a foreign cargo ship, to me one day becoming the wind sifting through all sails, to my one day becoming the water through which all ships must navigate, to my one day becoming the dark matter from which the stars hang at night, illuminating the way home for all who have strayed or been stolen. And now, kind captain, go home to rest. The last boost of coffee has rained down from your thermos flask and washed through your blood to mine. You who cruise the moon around the world so tight, rest sweetly as you sail home tonight. I am going to read, I think, 2 more poems. Yes. Okay. All right. So I'm going to read this one, and I'm going to dedicate it to Yesenia, because the first time I ever read it was at Split This Rock, and I remember on the way I was practicing it, and I was a little nervous about singing it, and she made a joke. She said that if I do a good job, I can do it on the subway and start asking people for money. So whenever I get nervous, I just, think about all the money I'm gonna make, if I get it right. So this is called Angelitos Negros, and it was inspired by a conversation with Rigoberto Gonzalez. Angelitos Negros. In the Mexican film, Angelitos Negros, both parents appear with skin as white as a Gitano's bolero sung by an indígena accompanied by the Moor's guitar. Bleached by celluloid in 1948, when in America the world's rainbow was polarized into black y blanco. In the film, Pedro Infante plays José Carlos and sings Angelitos Negros, while sitting in a chapel, asking the painter of the church's art to paint a picture with black angels who look like his character's dark-skinned daughter, a child his wife refuses to accept. Pintor, si pintas con amor, ¿por qué desprecias su color? Si sabes que en el cielo también los quiere Dios. Tonight, I sing the song from my morenos absent from my cathedral walls. O painter, painting with a foreign brush to the rumba of its old world bolero. Listen to our angels' chorus of inocentes morenos muertos. We morenos in the barrio cook a gumbo quilombo, our little taste of heaven with matches and propane and coal stones under a pot of cabra y culebra. We morenos are brown turned black, burnt by fire, fired from guardia guns, shooting us congos for the chanchudos of a rabi blanco legislador. Listen to los pelaos in the favelas kicking around the soccer ball. De pie, a pie, de pie, a pie, de pie, a pie, cabeza, cabeza, goal. Forced out of their homes by a world-class stadium they can never afford to get into. Forced into a life in the prison of their streets. They too deserve to be painted. Pintor, si pintas con amor, ¿por qué desprecias su color? Now, Eartha Kitt sings Píntame Angelitos Negros, the same Andrés Eloy Blanco poem Infante set to song on thrift store vinyl, playing in homemade YouTube clips. Through my headphones, I hear Kitt raise her voice high enough to swallow evening, if it does not give her a sky, with dark-skinned angels in its clouds tonight. Then dusk falls over the continent built on shadows, shackles, and shame, as the news paints yet another Negro as the devil. Broken-winged blackbird, 3 shades of jade, fly into the dark matter of outer space. Perhaps up there is a better painter, better God for us all to obey. I should have listened to the ancestors before I came in here. They were like, take off the jacket. You'll breathe better for the song stuff. And I just forgot, I guess. Anyway, it's on the floor now, so I hope they're happy. I did it. What you asked me to do. Okay. Last poem. This poem is dedicated to Central American migrants who the United States press referred to as the Surge. And these are Central American migrants. They're refugees that have been marching from Central America through Mexico to the United States for 20 years now. There's been this constant flow. And I wrote this poem thinking about them, as a fellow Central American. And the poet Monica Hand, who's a Kavikanam fellow who passed away a few years ago, she was the first one to believe in the poem, and so I always think about her when I read it. This is called Poder. And thank you to Francisco, thank you to Letras Latinas, thank you to my fellow conference attendees and panelists and readers tonight. This is really a treasure for me. I've actually been trying to get a reading with John Murillo for like 3 years related to this book. And so finally, Magic Man made it happen, Professor Aragon, so thank you. Poder. The difference between poetry and rhetoric is being ready to kill yourself instead of your children, wrote Audre Lorde. I say this now to the mothers who sent their children north, risking their babies' lives for a better living than chasing paper or running from drug dealers on the streets. The difference between art and design means being ready to die for what you desire others to achieve through your work. Hours of your life gone forever, making a little, shiny, fragile thing. I write to the mothers who send their children north, never knowing if they'll make it, but hoping that even if they don't, their creations might mean more than just the flesh and bone with which they're made, because they moved, because they desired. So many are quick to dismiss desire as too general a word, or this language as too simple to power the constant thrust towards betterment we call life. But poetry is sometimes made of such things. Words used so often we take them for granted. That's right. And forget their power is in how they unite existence through a common tongue. In Spanish, the word for power is the same as the word for I can, poder. One simple word banging the drum rhythm made by children's souls thumping against the earth. Poder, poder, poder. The power of doing in each disyllabic step of metric feet, moving us farther and farther away from the word being just rhetoric into the structure of its design, where we find the power to turn suicide into sacrifice, the power to turn beast into man, and man into martyr or miracle. This is what makes miracles. A desire path stretching 1,700 miles through an armed border wall, through electric barbed wire fences, a surge surmounting all odds to rise beyond the stratosphere. Knowing this too is poetry. Thank you.
Yesenia Montilla is an Afro-Latino poet and daughter of immigrants. Her work has appeared in the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day, and she has been published in literary journals such as the Pittsburgh Poetry Review, Best of American Poets 2021 and 2022, Prairie Schooner, the Gulf Coast, and more. She received her MFA from Drew University in Poetry and Poetry Translation and is a 2014 Canto Mundo Fellow and a 2020 NYFA Fellow. I first encountered Yesenia Montilla from an episode of the podcast WMFA in 2017. The podcast opened with the question, why poetry? And her answer has stuck with me ever since. Quote, you can create a whole world on a page. Yesenia's poetry does just that. It creates a whole world on a page. Her imagery is vibrant and palpable. In her first collection, The Pink Box, which was published by Willow Books in 2015 and longlisted for a PEN Award in 2016, her poem on the subway reads, rat scuttles across Jimmy Choo's like a flying fish across a circus tightrope. A whole world held in ink on a page. And an image, if I might subjectively add, feels could only be captured by a poet who lives in New York, as Yesenia does. But her poetry doesn't just hold the world on a page. It extrapolates the worlds that exist within the body, the worlds of ancestors, the world of art, the world of sexuality, the world of creation, the world of the self, the world of identity, and the list could continue on. Her second collection, published by Four Way Books just about a week and a half ago, titled Muse Found in a Colonized Body, contains a percussive lyricism that holds the colonized body with tenderness, holds colonization responsible for its permeating effects, and holds the reader in conversation by wielding humor, pop culture, and history not as a weapon, but as a song. Yesenia's work vibrates in the same way she describes in a poem with birds in it. It sounds like a humming caught in the throat, and it feels like a needle strumming. Most importantly, she presents reality, not the dream, that it isn't just a body that holds a world within, but a person with a name and a heartbeat. Her poetry honors those that have been lost, and urges us as readers to push forward, to continue dismantling the systems that oppress and silence the muses found in colonized bodies, as it is a song in a collection that does not end with a period, but a dash, a connection point to the reader that asks, here is the song, how will you answer? Please join me in welcoming Yesenia Montilla.
Thank you for such a beautiful introduction. Thank you, Notre Dame, for having me, ILS, IRR, and my fellow poets and scholars, and also the students for being here. I'm gonna keep time. I'm gonna start with this first poem, and it's for Francisco. And I think I wouldn't be here if you hadn't walked in and heard me read that poem, I think. So let's start there. Ode to the Mouth. Late night dreamer, beggar, two suctioning half moons facing each other, touching like lovers. Pleasure palace with a slick tiled roof, walls like a jellyfish, small cave home of one lonely eel, pink lollipop. Traveler, wanderlust. I love all the semi-precious gleaming stones that align your insides. I love that in you it is always rainy season. In you there is always room for witness. Let me decorate your seashell with blood red stain. Let me leave traces of you on a singular body. You, stiff maker, flower chaser, poem whisperer. The ear is your best friend. To it, you transfer all of your secrets. Wordsmith, dirty word slinger, linguist, tú dices amor, and it is so. In your varied forms, I learn how a little boat must feel against the current. I want to set you free. Imagine what you can do estranged from the body. Would you fly, little beak? Would you drag your filthy lips over mountain trails, through town squares, into big cities, up elevators, around rooms? Would you devour everything, everyone? Will you grow so big that you could swallow the whole world, swallow it like an oyster, gift horses and all? Would you chew on it like tough meat? Would you spit it out like gum. So the new book, Muse Found in a Colonized Body, has the title poem, which is in 10 parts, and it sort of interweaves through the book. I'm going to read the first section, Muse Found in a Colonized Body, and it has an epigraph from Helene Sijou. There is no greater love than the love a wolf feels for the lamb it doesn't eat. 1. They say when the Spaniards came, we thought them gods. They came with sincere eyes, but insincere mouths and cocks. They knew something about the universe, and we only knew about the earth, not about the stars, unless being guided by them is a kind of knowing. But no, in those days the stars knew us more than we them, and that might be the difference between the wolf and the lamb, our relationship to bounty. I think what I want to say here is that to the wolf go the spoils, and yet there's something about being a lamb, the danger, the never knowing when the wolf will be hungry enough. How do you not love yourself when you constantly survive your undoing just by being precious? I don't like coyness. If I love you, I will take your mouth first, because that is where the breath lives. Does that make me a wolf, or does this? When I'm near you, I shackle my intentions and feast with my eyes. I won't dare eat of your flesh. How could I? It would be like the snake that eats itself from the tail. Eventually, it chokes on everything, its rough scales, its heart all colonized and tender. The whole world becomes its body, half-eaten and dragging in the dirt. So, I love Marvel movies. I love comics, I love Marvel, as problematic as it can be sometimes. This is Making Love to Captain America. Steve Rogers, not Sam Wilson, that poem's coming. And it has an epigraph from Tony Stark's when he says, "Sometimes I want to punch you in your perfect teeth." Could any human be more perfect? He's all the pretty whiteness I was thought to want to be or to have or to seduce, maybe, with my Thai African roots, my dusting of Europa found in the decoding of my DNA, somewhere near the kink of my hair and the size of my breasts. I'm not sure how I love him more with his uniform off or on, with the shield in front of him to ward off the enemy, or with his shield behind his back, his arms left open for an embrace. He's always right, even when he's wrong, even when he doesn't know the difference between the mouth open for exit or entry. I want to make love to him, be wrapped up in all the stars and stripes of his conviction. I want to point out to him that the enemy is not always out there. Sometimes your enemy is your neighbor. Sometimes your enemy is some kid from Queens with daddy issues. Sometimes your enemy runs for president on your soil and calls you a thief, a rapist, a criminal, a choke in America's throat. Sometimes the enemy is forgetting that Cap and I can never see eye to eye because he's been on ice so long he doesn't know that America has become a dirty word that I only still use out of habit, that the habit is a secret thing I don't mention, like my deep desire for white boys and my constant need to break my body against them. Evolution has been unkind, Cap. Did you learn anything while you were cold? Say yes, and maybe there's hope for us all. Maybe we should all be put on ice, too. Or maybe we should just let loose. Will you destroy my enemies as easily as you do your own? I don't want to know. The fantasy of you is so sweet. Let me stay sleeping. let me stay dreaming. And when I wake, let me roll over and see your face, pretty white boy with pretty teeth. If I punch you, I'm the only one that bleeds. Philando Castillo was killed by the police while he was in his car with his beloved and son in tow. Actually, I don't know if it's a son, it might be a daughter, but daughter. Thank you. Philando Castillo's name is so beautiful. I remember lovemaking. You are no longer as beautiful as you once were. Neither am I. It is a symptom of longing or losing, to lose your hair or fill out in the wrong places. We lost a small window of time where both our bodies could have been naked in bed, petitioning poetry to save us. And now all we have is the starkness of Black bodies lying everywhere, on roadsides, in the car, outside the bodega, near the docks. When I first heard his name, I remember thinking, Philando Castillo, he's a prince, or a god, or just a man riding in his car with child and love in tow, or a moan in my mouth, or the spider in Nikki Giovanni's poem, or just the beast in every white man's imagination with horns and teeth and a gun for a hand. In this dead world full of the dying, I no longer care about losing my dress or my heart. I only care about revolution and the ugly business of revenge. Between the knife handle and its blade, that is the only home I know that gives true pleasure. Yeah, I was gonna read another poem, but then after John's talk, I think I'll read this one, Chasing Duende. And I have a tattoo of Duende. Come talk to me about it. They say he has a lover's tongue, all warm liquid and plaited fur, that when he decides to lick you like the rim of a salted glass, the moon becomes full behind your eyelids and God stays at bay. Querido Duende, I've worshipped you, you without a face, your irrational heart. I say, ven a mí, and I get my monthly blood. My pockets are full of coins now. I use them to pay the ferrymen. I shuttle the dead across the river, hold their hand as though they were my children. Grandfather and your tribe of thousands, grandmother, could I have birthed you, made you in your most perfect image, all blue-eyed and thin-lipped. Sister, not your time. Father, any day now. Last night I dreamt of hands on me, not like divination, but like devotion. 2 cocks and a naked neck in the yard. Yemaya tells me, sacrifice them all of them, pluck their feathers and bring your honey mouth to the shore. She likes sweet and soft things, forces me to tell the story of my great love. But love is an endangered word, untranslatable, its etymology closer to that of raven or he who won't let me touch him. What if my wrists bleed from such longing? What if I choke on a picture? What if I forget the thinness of my waist at dawn and lose myself to magic? What then? Will I recover? Will the monster that hides in the soles of my shoes finally reveal himself? Will he be she or they or a god with red lipstick? I swear, I hear whispering in the bed sheets and my eyes grow, I hear whispering in the bed sheets and my eyes grow heavy, my hips start to rock, a valley between 2 mounds at the very beginning, before light, before the rib was plucked and the honeybee knelt at the flower's entryway. Yemaya, will you bring me duende? Bring me a lock of his hair, his head severed that I can sew onto me like a new dress. Duende, do I know your half-eaten smile, your dirty words, how we already met and I confused your sucking for a song, this heartache for a poem. When I was kissed by the full-lipped girl at midnight, I saw another's face, and I haven't been able to see anything else. Brown eyes, crooked teeth, a beard so manicured like a rich man's lawn. Thank you. And I'm gonna end with this poem for Roberto Carlos Garcia, who is one of the poets here and a dear friend. If I can find it. Imagining him running at the sight of deer. True story. I was not there, but she tells me the story over and over, how after spotting a mob of deer, he ran like someone who is afraid to become the other becoming. The sound an animal makes all guttural, bottomless, and rooted. He who feeds me joy and sorrow equally with golden tongue and eyes so bright. I imagine stars once living in the hollow sockets of his caramel face. And let's be clear, he ran from deer. Because he knows that beautiful doesn't always equal tame, and that gentle things are the ones that risk it all. Which is to say, if deer could talk, they would tell you something about wanting to kill a thing and about being killed. We oblige. We kill them for sports and with great carelessness, and we do each other the same. So he ran from deer because maybe he understands that one day the targeted animal will fight back. It will straighten out his long neck like a heron, and his eyes will become wild, and this is what being hunted does to a man. I mean deer, I mean any animal on this earth. We live and we die. What happens in between is not up to fate, but something more complex. Say mystery, say the lover's soft back in moonlight, say fear, say the smell of honeysuckle in a barren field, say hunger, and I say, run. Run. It's the only thing our body does well enough, good enough to stay alive. Thank y'all.
I don't know if anybody has noticed, but John Murillo has superpowers. I swear to God, I witnessed 2 of them earlier today. When we came into the afternoon session, it was cloudy and raining outside. And John was discussing the work of Nancy Morejon, and he mentions the word overcast. And I promise you, 2 seconds later, the sun comes out. Bro, I have witnesses right here. So first power, weather control, right? Second power is telepathy or foresight or some other psychic ability. At the end of his discussion, John was saying that his ideal reader, or at least one of his ideal readers, is the kid on the train who is not a poet, who maybe isn't into poetry. Like, the kid knows game, he's just not that into it. Well, funny enough, I was that kid. I used to take an hour-long train in the morning and night to get from Brownsville to Coral Gables, where I used to go to college in Miami. And I would read poetry or do homework to pass the time. And last night, I had written about trains when I was making this introduction. Like, I have the notebook on my back, I swear. So if it sounds like what I say next tries to fit with what he said earlier, it's because dude got superpowers, right? So, I don't remember the first time I read John Murillo's work. I wish I could tell you that I was in some library stacks and randomly came across it and it was like, yo, this dude is something else. I wish I could tell you that I first read him on the train back home where bullet holes small enough to fit your pinky through are in my mom's front gate. I spent the last few days trying to remember when I came across his work, but I keep drawing a blank. I think I know why. When you read Murillo's work, there's a familiarity to it. It's not so much in how he writes, like that's all fresh, but it's in the way he makes vivid the unreliability of memory. It's not deja vu, but it's more like if deja vu had a cousin, The way when you meet someone and you think you've known them forever, Murillo's work comes off so familiar that it will have you questioning yourself. Like, what was I doing in Los Angeles in 1976 or in the summer of 1977? Or on November 26, 1980? Like, these are all dates from his work if you don't know. Right? It's hard to remember when I first started reading his work because he writes like he's recounting an experience y'all had together, as if we're at a bar in New York or hunched over a box of vinyl records in an attic in Chicago, as if he knew you before you knew yourself. When you read Murillo's work, it's hard not to feel both a sense of rage and hope. That feeling of, even if the house is burning, we're gonna make it through. That feeling that we're gonna bounce back because it's either that or we're gonna be dead in the street. That feeling that this world is gonna love me or else. When you read Murillo, there's not much you can do except, yeah, this dude's the real deal. John Murillo is the author of the poetry collections Up Jump the Boogie, finalist for both the Kate Tufts Discovery Award and the Penn Open Book Award. He's also the author of Contemporary American Poetry, winner of the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. Murillo's poems have appeared in publications like American Poetry Review, Poetry, and Best American Poetry. He's an associate professor of English at Wesleyan University.
I've never spoken to anyone about this until now, until you. I slept once in the field beyond the riverbank, a flock of nightjars watching over me. That was the summer a farmer found his daughter hanging in the hayloft and wished for the first time he had not touched her so. I wish I could say we were close, the girl and I mean, but only knew her to wave hello and walked her once halfway up the road before turning finally into my grandmother's yard. This was Ontario, California, 1983, which is to say there was no river, and I wouldn't know a nightjar if it bit me. But the girl was real. And the day they found her, that was real. And the dress she wore, same as on our walk. Periwinkle, she called it. I called it blue. Blue with bright yellow flowers all over. The dress and the flowers, they too were real. And on our walk, I remember we cut through the rail yard and came upon a dead coyote lying near the tracks. A frail and dusty heap of regret. He was companion to no one. Stone still, staring, our shadows stretched long and covering the animal. She told me something I want to say about loneliness. Something I've since forgotten, the way I've forgotten, though I can see her face as if she were standing right here, her very name. Let's call her Dolores, from dolor, Spanish for anguish. And whatever the sky, however lovely that afternoon, I remember mostly the wind, how a breeze unraveled what was left of a braid, and when I tried to brush from Dolores' brow a few loose strands, how she flinched, how she ran the rest of the way home, how I never saw her after that, except when they carried her from the barn, her periwinkle dress, her blue legs and arms, and the fields ablaze with daisies. I spent the rest of that summer in the rail yard with my dead coyote, watching trains loaded and leaving. All summer long, I'd pelt them with stones. All summer long, I'd use the stones to spell the girl's name, Dolores maybe, in the dirt. All summer long, fire ants crawled over and between each letter, her name now its own small town. A season of heat and heavy rains washed my coyote to nothing, only teeth and a few stubborn bones that refused finally to go down. Weeks into autumn, someone found the father hanged from the same groaning tie beams, the hayloft black with bottleflies. But that was 1983, Ontario, California, which is to say the bottleflies are dead. So too the ants, and neither field nor barn is where I left it. I've never spoken to anyone about this until now, until you. I gathered a handful of my coyote's bones, his teeth, and strung them all on fishing wire, a talisman to ward off anguish, a talisman I held out to you. Now, please come closer. Take this from my hand. Thank y'all for being here. Thank you, Francisco, for putting this together. Thank you, everyone. Poets and scholars, man, this is, we don't really get opportunities like this to be together, especially given the last couple of years, what's been going on. This is really, really special. And it's really cool to hear someone talk about your work, man. That's dope, especially if they like it. So thank you for that. So I have good news and bad news. Good news is I'm only gonna read 2 more poems. Bad news is I write really long poems. So 2 more poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey. I stole that joke from somebody, but he ain't here, so. That's right, that's right. On confessionalism. Not sleepwalking, but waking still with my hand on a gun and the gun in a mouth and the mouth on a face of a man on his knees. Autumn of '89, and I'm standing in a Section 8 apartment parking lot, pistol cocked, and staring down at this man, then up into the mug of an old woman staring, watering the single sad flower to the left of her stoop, the flower also staring. My engine idling behind me, a slow moaning bass line in the bark of a dead rapper nudging me on, all to say someone's brokenhearted. And this man with the gun in his mouth, this man who, like me, is really little more than a boy, may or may not have something to do with it. May or may not have said a thing or two, betrayed a secret, say, that walked my love away. And why not say it? She adored me, and I, her. More than anyone, anything in life up to then, and then still for 2 decades after, and therefore went for broke. Blacked out and woke, having gutted my piggy and pawned all my gold to buy what a homeboy said was a Beretta. Blacked out and woke, my hand on a gun, the gun in a mouth, a man who was really a boy on his knees. And because I loved the girl, I actually paused before I pulled the trigger. Once, twice, 3 times. Then panicked, not just because the gun jammed, but because what if it hadn't? Because who did I almost become there that afternoon in a Section 8 apartment parking lot, pistol cocked with the sad flower staring? Because I knew the girl I loved, no matter how this all played out, would never have me back. Day of damaged ammo or grime that clogged the chamber. Day of faulty rods or springs come loose in my fist. Day nobody died. So why not hallelujah, say amen or thank you? My mother sang for years of God, babes, and fools. My father, lymph node masses fading from his x-rays, said surviving one thing means another comes and kills you. He's dead, and so I trust him. Dead, and so I'd wonder years about the work I left undone. Boy, on his knees, a man now, risen and likely plodding his long way back to me. Fuck it. I tucked my tool like the movie gangsters do and jumped back in my bucket. Cold enough day to make a young man weep. Afternoon when everything or nothing changed forever. The dead rapper grunted. The bass line faded. My spirits whispered something from the trees. I left, then lost the pistol in a storm drain. Somewhere between that life and this. Left the pistol in a storm drain, but never got around to wiping away the prints. So if you're not from the West Coast and out of a certain age, you may not know that bucket in that poem referred to a car. Bucket's like West Coast slang for a hoopty, which I think is East Coast slang for a jalopy, which is old school slang for a broken, busted down car. So I say that because one time afterwards, somebody came to me and was like, that poem when you jumped into a bucket, why did you jump into a bucket? I was like, no, it's not an actual bucket. So sometimes, there's a lifesaver up here. Is this like a hint or something? I'm gonna eat it. So I'm gonna read this next poem and try not to say too much about the genesis of the poem. My wife tells me I do that too much. So I'm gonna read the poem, and if you don't understand anything, y'all should send her an email or I don't know what y'all do, Instagram or TikTok, Twitter, whatever y'all do. Send her one of those things. I'll just say it has a bleeding title. The title runs into the text, and it's real long, so I hope you'll stay with me. Upon reading that Eric Dolphy transcribed even the calls of certain species of birds, I think first of two sparrows I met when walking home late night years ago in another city not unlike this. The one bird frantic, attacking I thought the way she swooped down, circled my head and flailed her wings in my face. How she seemed to scream each time I swung. How she dashed back and forth between me and a blood-red Corolla parked near the opposite curb. How finally I understood. I spied another bird, also calling, his foot inexplicably caught in the car's closed door, beating his whole bird body against it, trying, it appeared, to bang himself free. And who knows how long he'd been there, flailing. Who knows? He and the other I mistook at first for a bat. They called to me. Something between squawk and chirp, something between song and prayer to do something, anything. And like any good God, I disappeared. Not indifferent exactly, but with things to do and most likely on my way home from another heartbreak. Call it 1997. And say I'm several thousand miles from home, by which I mean those were the days I made of everyone a love song. By which I mean I was lonely and unrequited. But that's not quite it either. Truth is, I did manage to find a few to love me, but couldn't always love them back. The Rasta law professor, the firefighter's wife, the burlesque dancer whose daughter blackened drawings with M's to mean the sky was full of birds the day her daddy died. I think his widow said he drowned one morning on a fishing trip. Anyway, I'm digressing. But if you asked that night, did I mention it was night? Why I didn't even try to jimmy the lock to spring the sparrow, I couldn't say truthfully that it had anything to do with envy. with wanting a woman to plead as deeply for me as these sparrows did one for the other? No. I'd have said something instead about the neighborhood itself. The car thief shot a block and a half east the week before, or about the men I came across nights prior, sweat-slicked and shirtless, grappling in the middle of the street, the larger one's chests pressed to the back of the smaller, bruised and bleeding both. I know you thought this was about birds, but stay with me. I left them both in the street, the same street where I'd leave the sparrows, the men embracing, and for all one knows, they could have been lovers. The one whispering an old, old tune into the ear of the other, baby, baby, don't leave me this way. I left the men where I'd leave the sparrows and their song. And as I walked away, I heard one of the men call to me, please, or help, or brother, or some such. And I didn't break stride, not one bit. It's how I've learned to save myself. Let me try this another way. Call it 1977, and say I'm back west, South Central Los Angeles, my mother and father at it again, but this time in the street, broad daylight, and all the neighbors watching. One, I think his name was Sonny, runs out from his duplex to pull my father off. You see where I'm going with this. My mother crying out, fragile as a sparrow. Sonny fighting my father, fragile as a sparrow. And me, years later, trying to get it all down. As much for you, I'm saying, as for me. Sonny catches a left, lies flat on his back, blood starting to pool in his own wife wailing, my mother wailing, and traffic backed now half a block. Horns, whistles, and soon sirens. 1977, summer, and all the trees full of birds. Hundreds, I swear. And since I'm the one writing it, I'll tell you, they were crying. Which brings me back to Dolphy and his transcribing. The jazz man, I think, wanted only to get it down pure, to get it down exact. The animal racking itself against a car's steel door. The animals in the trees reporting. The animals we make of ourselves and one another, flailing, failing. Stay with me now. Days after the dust-up, my parents took me to the park. And in this park was a pond. And in this pond were birds. Not sparrows, but swans. And my father spread a blanket and brought from a basket some apples and a paring knife. Summertime, my mother wore sunglasses and long sleeves. My father, now sober, cursed himself for leaving the radio, but my mother forgave him and said as she caressed the back of his hand that we could just listen to the swans. And we listened, and I watched. Two birds coupling, one beating its wings as it mounted the other. Summer, 1977, I listened and watched. When my parents made love late into that night, I covered my ears in the next room, scanning the encyclopedia for swans. It meant nothing to me, then at least, but did you know the collective noun for swans is a lamentation? And is a lamentation not its own species of song? What a woman wails, punch drunk in the street, or what a widow might sing, learning her man was drowned by swans, a lamentation of them. Imagine the capsized boat, the panicked man struck about the eyes, nose, and mouth each time he comes up for air. Imagine the birds coasting away and the waters suddenly calm, either trumpet swans or mutes, the dead man's wife running for help, crying to any who'd listen. A lamentation, and a city busy saving itself. I'm digressing, sure. But did you know that to digress means to stray from the flock? When I left my parents' house, I never looked back. By which I mean I made like a god and disappeared. As when I left the sparrows and the copulating swans. As when someday I'll leave this city, its every flailing, its every animal song. Thank you.
Let's give it up again. Our poets are open to answering some questions, so who would like to ask a question? Don't be shy.
And Francisco said the first question gets $5.
So what advice do you have for like young poets who are just starting out and don't know anything about like publishing or like, what kind of opportunities are available and stuff like that?
I'd say to young poets just starting out, not to think about publishing and opportunities, and think about studying and reading and loving the art, and play the long game. No rush to publish. Publish is not an accomplishment. People publish shit poems all the time. It's true. Shit poets win prizes. Publish just means make public. Yeah. So play the long game. The thing about what we do is, my first book came out when I was 38, and I was still considered a young poet. LeBron James, I think, is 37, 36 now, and they're treating him like he's 72 years old, right? Basketball, 38 is old, but in poetry is mad young. So I imagine you're mad years away from 38. So imagine you put all this time in, right? And you're just working, studying your craft, and then you hit, when you're in your late 30s. That's plenty of time to master what you want to be doing. And I think there's like this pressure, right? The social pressure to kind of publish and kind of to be in the conversation very early. And I know it's probably not, what you want to hear, but I think it's the best advice that I can give, is to just, the publishing thing will come, right? It's easy, it's cheap and easy to publish, but it's hard to write a good poem. That said, Poets Market is a place where you can find out where to publish. Poets and Writers, or you can find places to publish. So you're like, that's not what I didn't ask you. I see how to publish. You can do it. Find people's books. Let me see any of your books, and go to the acknowledgments page, and you can find out where. Like if you did Yesenia's work, and you say I'm kind of in conversation with her work, then you would find the acknowledgments page, see where she sent work. And you kind of get a sense that they might like what you're doing too, and you send to them like that. So, yeah.
Another question?
You all describe home or some feeling of home, like within your work. So, what would you say home is, or what would you say the feeling of where you feel at?
Okay. I feel home wherever I feel God and I feel God wherever I hear music. So I don't think music always is what comes out of the radio. I think music can be many different things. And a good friend of mine, good friend of many people here, Rosebud Ben-Oni, who's a poet that everyone should look up her work. If This Is the Age We End Discovery is her latest book. And she and I talk a lot about music and how we need to hear it in order to write a poem. And when I moved specifically to Michigan to do my MFA, I felt very out, like a fish out of water. And one of the first signs that I was on a different planet is what it felt like, is that I was driving around Detroit, which is right outside of Ann Arbor, and there was no Latino radio station. And I was like, where am I? You know? But it doesn't have to be music itself. The music could be food. It could be something that makes you feel at home, right? For some people, it's laughter. And a friend of mine, his name is Jeff, he's got an incredible laugh. I met him at Michigan. I was teaching at Rutgers, and I was in the faculty lounge one day, and I heard this incredible laughter. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. You sound so much like my friend Jeff, and I miss him so much. And you know what the person who was laughing said? Oh my gosh, are you talking about Jeffrey Fitzgibbon Hughes? That's my brother. Yeah, and so I think home is in the music, and the music could look like a lot of things. For me, it's so much of it is sound, you know, but it could be a familiar smell, it could be a familiar image, you know, that's out there. And I would say, try to write about that if you're interested in writing about home or place.
Yeah, I'll say that home for me is on the page, and it's with my community. You know, I'm one of the things I want to say about what to do as a young poet is to find your community, and that's where home is for me. But also when I'm alone and it's just me and a blank page, that's like when I feel really, really held.
Would you describe your work as more of, and this is kind of based on like how I felt listening to what you all have said, would you describe your work more as an art of expression or as an art of healing for yourself?
Yeah, to both.
Neither. Yeah, I don't know. It's not healing. Yeah, I mean, I think what comes after can be healing, right? So the last poem I read, talks about some really touchy subject matter. It wasn't healing. It was quite torturous to write the poem, but having the poem done, published, and then reading it out over and over again, it causes me to have to, recount certain events from my childhood, which gives occasion for processing, right? And then the processing, however, that can be a healing process. But when I'm writing, it's not healing. I'm just trying to write well, yeah? And even expression, it's not that I have necessarily something inside of me that I'm not wanting to express. I'm trying to make something, right? So for me, it sounded glib, just coming like both, neither. But it is true. It's just, for me, neither expression nor healing.
I answered both because healing is super important to me. And I didn't really know what poetry was when I started writing it. I was literally just trying to process so much of what I was surrounded by. And so, the students that I teach right now seem to be very particularly interested in healing, because I think collectively as a community, as like a human community, we've been through a lot of death and trauma recently. And so I always am really encouraging of students using poetry and turning to all sorts of creative writing to help process and to heal from the really from like the realization that there's so much of our life that's out of our control. You know, I think that even just that realization is something that you still have to process sometimes, especially when you're a young adult. So I encourage anyone who's interested in healing to turn to poetry. I do think it has that potential, but I don't think that every poet has to take that on as their mission.
I think I can agree with John on the fact that some writing is torturous. But I know from continuously writing that at the end of it, I'm gonna feel so free. And that's what I seek when I'm writing. I'm trying to create better versions of myself every single time. And so I need to continuously write and get through those tough moments. Yeah, it's hard, but at the end of it, it could be so transformative. So yeah, for me, it's healing. And in terms of self-expression, yeah, but when you hone your voice, and it's your voice, and nobody else sounds like you, then that's you. That's your own way of being.
Do one more. One more?
This is your only opportunity in life, y'all. This is it.
Yes.
I have a question. So, as poets, how do you guys find the courage to be so vulnerable all the time?
Notice nobody's moving to the microphone, right?
I don't know. There's just, you're walking around in New York City and some shit is nagging at you, right? And you kind of ruminate with it for weeks. And you know that it's gonna jump off and it's gonna be some shit when you write it down on a page. But you have to do it anyway. Because if you don't, it stays inside of you. And that's anti-healing, right? So for me, getting it out and being vulnerable is a part of the healing process that I was talking about. And so many of my poems talk about crazy things like my dad's drug addiction, and that's really vulnerable. And sometimes I'm like, damn, when my dad reads these poems, what is he gonna say? But I care more about my healing, right? And so you've got to negotiate with yourself, and you got to figure out what you can go through and what you can't, and how vulnerable you can be. But I guarantee that if you go all the way in, you're gonna write magic.
I think that I was recalling a conversation I had with a friend of mine named Amy, who is a really close friend of mine, but we talk maybe once a year sometimes, at least in person these days with the pandemic. And I was telling her about some really challenging experiences that I had maybe about 2 years ago on our sort of like annual catch-up. And she said, how great it is that you had an opportunity to grow. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, because if it wasn't for that, you really didn't face any other major obstacles that year. So how else would you have grown? And I remember that, and every time I'm facing a new challenge, and your question, today, some days I'm feeling really great vocally. Some days I'm feeling awful. Some days I'm feeling like I'm overexposed and everybody knows my business. But I still get up here and I face those challenges to share this work over and over again, because I know that in it is an opportunity for growth. And so I try to face my fears to continually be vulnerable with people, even if my, on any of the levels, because I know that it makes me better. You're talking about better versions of yourself. Every year I'm trying to be a better version of myself, and I think being vulnerable is a part of that.
No, I don't. I just want to tell you, I don't have an answer to the question. It feels like a question that I need to sit with. But I just wanted you to know that the reason I'm not answering your question is because of that, not because it wasn't a good question. It's a great question. So I just wanted to tell you that. But yeah, I'm going to probably spend some time with this overnight. Thank you.
Thank you.